Monday must mean the money man. I keep looking for your name in the Paradise Papers of the super rich and their offshore money, and it'll come out.
It's the famous, it's not the rich in the wrong paper.
The investigative journalists will get to it and dig you out. The biggest thing going on in the United States of America right now, other than different investigations going on in sexual harassment, is tax reform. Obviously a huge battle down in Washington. It's passed the House, now pending over in the Senate. What's your thoughts?
I'm much more optimistic today than I was a year ago. I think Paul Ryan did a good job in getting it through the House. You know, it's a 490-something page bill, and there's a lot of details in it. I'm sure the K Street lobbyists are dissecting it and dissecting it over and over again. It's not a perfect bill. There are things that I would have done differently. But I don't think perfect should be the enemy of good. According to the Tax Foundation, over the decade it will create almost 1 million jobs. There'll be an increase in after-tax income of about 4%. That translates into Rhode Island to about 3,100 jobs. It translates into after-tax income over the long run for the average Rhode Islander of about $2,700. So it does a lot of good. It does simplify to the degree that you can simplify. You know, one of the complaints is that too much of the breaks go to the rich.
Yeah.
But you got half the people paying 97% of the taxes. But if you look at it, I looked at a family making $59,000, you know, which is pretty much the average.
In Rhode Island?
No, nationally.
Yeah.
And they would get, their taxes would go from about $1,600 to about $1,200. They get about a 75% cut. Now, a family making $300,000, their tax cut would be about $6,000. But that's not 75%. That's
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
9%. You're not perfect. I'd rather have seen the corporate tax go from 35 to 22 and use that additional money to fill in some of the other cuts that were made.
And it's going to 20, correct?
Correct. It could
Yeah.
go to 22, 23 and still be competitive. But you could use some of that money to fill in some of the other types of changes that were made.
Go ahead.
No, so I think, like, my point is not perfect, but it's certainly a lot better than we have.
The biggest negative on this seems to be, well, I'll give you an example today. The realtor sent out their October numbers, and they crowed about how good the real estate market here is in Rhode Island. The average single-family house is selling at $264,000. But at the end of their press release, they said all this good news could be completely undone by tax reform and the change in deductibility.
With all due respect, and I respect realtors, because somebody else will have to sell my house one of these days. You know, they're smoking pot. And let me give you an example. In the House bill, they maintain a $10,000 exemption for property taxes.
Yeah.
So if you bought a $300,000 house, which is slightly above the average,
Yeah.
and your tax rate was $20, which is a little bit below the average, but you have a $6,000 tax bill, you still get full deductibility if you used
Right.
it. Besides, there are about a third of the people in the state that deduct, 70% do not deduct. So that's the first issue.
And also where the cap is, it really only affects those who are buying significant pieces of property.
Well, one of the things I argued for was that the $10,000 cap should have been a $15,000 cap, and I'll give you the other side of the coin.
Sure.
So if you live in Providence in a $500,000 house, and I think the tax rate in Providence last time I looked was about $18.80 on a real estate property, you'd be paying
After the homeowner's deduction.
right. You'd
Yeah.
be paying about $9,400 in taxes.
That's about ballpark.
If you lived in East Greenwich,
Yeah.
and you had a $500,000 house at a tax rate of $2,470, you'd be paying about $12,400 in taxes. So you would not get the full benefit of deductibility. It's going to vary all over the lot from town to town. And I argue that no, 10,000 didn't really recognize regional housing cost differentials, and we probably should have shot to keep it 12.5, 13, or 14, somewhere in that range. So there's a modest impact there. The second impact that the realtors may be talking about is that the interest payments under the House bill would apply to the first $500,000 of value. It's currently $1 million of value. The Senate didn't touch that. And I anticipate if that does get to conference committee, that will be worked out. So I'm not quite sure what the realtors are talking about in terms of Rhode Island. The Senate bill is true. The Senate bill does away with the property tax exemption. But the politics gets very interesting. The senator could do that because there was no Republican senator from California, New York, New Jersey, on and on. So it didn't hurt to do that. House couldn't do that as easily because there are Republican representatives from those states. So when that gets to committee, I think the House will have.
So we're out of the House, we're over to the Senate. We've got some key votes up in the air. Susan Collins, does Susan Collins now control the United States government? It certainly seems that way.
Well, Susan Collins said something very interesting.
Yeah.
She hasn't been as belligerent about this as she
No,
was
not at all.
here. And
She wants some stuff.
She wants some stuff, and Murkowski's going to, there's some stuff in that bill for Alaska, so let's see what she has to say.
Right.
What they basically have said is that, Susan, more so than the senator from Alaska, has basically said she didn't think it was appropriate to get away with the Obama mandate in the bill. And that'll be discussed. The president's people have said that they would accept a bill without abolishing the mandate, though I think it's bizarre because the people that pay the mandate, 80% of the mandate are paid by people with incomes AGI gross less than $50,000. It's really a tax on poor people, and it doesn't change the subsidies, it doesn't change any benefit. I would not be surprised, within the wisdom of the legislature, if they felt strongly on getting rid of the individual mandate, which a lot of Republicans do, is to marry it with the Alexander Murray bill, which protected the subsidies, payments. So there's room to compromise on that, but that would be a concern. I'll tell you where the concerns are in the Senate. That's the one issue.
Yeah.
There are a couple of senators feel uncomfortable about that. I think it's more perception of politics than what the impact would be. The other issue that a couple of senators, particularly Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, are fighting over is the pass-through.
Yeah.
And basically how that works, they lowered, as we've talked about, the corporate tax from 35 to 20. In the House, they've lowered the rate on pass-through income. And pass-through income are a business person just passing that through and paying through their return. And the question is equity between corporations and individuals in paying business taxes. And we have a lot of small businesses, so it's an important question. So the House lowered the rate to 25, but on 30% of the income, because it said 70% was subject to the regular rate to avoid abuses, and there would be abuses, and 30% at 25. The Senate took a slightly different approach. They gave a 17.4% deduction for small business on small business income. They, I understand, have met some of Senator Johnson's concerns, but that'll be an issue of how you.
He's the toughest vote, maybe.
Well, I think my sense is that it's hopeful that progress can be made and they can work on the pass through. So that's the second issue: Obamacare mandates, the pass through. Then there are issues that Senator Koch is raising and Senator Flake. Deficit hawks. It does add $1.5 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. And that's something that should be taken seriously, and so we'll see how that washes out.
Well, and Flake and Corker are also functionally free agents right now from the Republican Party in the White House, as they both announced that they are not going to run for re-election, and they're both extremely dissatisfied with the president's actions over the last year.
Well, somebody should tell the president what you say comes around.
Yeah.
And if you need people to approve things that you don't insult them. That's kind of a basic business rule, I guess, except
business rule, kindergarten rule, just about every kind of rule.
Except if you're a New York real estate developer, then they probably have different rules that apply. But there's a legitimate concern about the deficit, and the argument there, and I think it's an important argument to have, is how do you forecast what the revenue is going to be? Dynamic forecasting, and say that it will have some impact on the economy and try to responsibly forecast that would be, or static forecasting, and you come to different numbers. But we do know this, that the deficit during the 8 years from Obama to now increased from 10 to $20 trillion. We also know, and some people don't like to admit this, that you're not going to close the deficit on the spending side, because you ain't cutting defense, and you ain't cutting Medicaid, and you're not cutting Medicare, you're not cutting Social Security, and you're going to pay your debt. So if you can't balance the budget or move towards balance on the spending side, then the question is, what can you do on the revenue side to grow the economy? And that's a philosophical and a political argument, and it'll be hammered out with Flake and with Corker and other responsible.
What's the timeline on the Senate side?
I hope there's a bill finished before Christmas.
Voted for on the Senate floor and
Yeah.
then go to conference?
Then, yeah.
Yeah.
And conference is not gonna be, there'll be some differences in it, like always, there's some personalities that get in the way of, that. But when you look at the main structure, the bones of both bills, it's not gonna be difficult to reach a compromise on both of those bills.
So I'd gone to work for the Senate right during tax reform in 1986, and John Chafee was a senior member of Finance Committee and was a conferee. That conference went on for a good long time, and it's really where the battle took place, was at the conference.
Yeah, I think that will be a real, and that K Street is getting ready for that, but there's another political dynamic that didn't exist in 1986. The Republican Party is between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
They can fight for a perfect tax bill, which no one will ever achieve, or they can get something done. And as I go around and talk to people, the politics of getting something done and not looking totally inept in conquering the perfect tax bill.
Well, and the other complexity in '86 was the House was controlled by the Democrats and had been held by the Democrats for the last 2,000 years or something like that.
And we had a president in 1986 who knew how to negotiate.
Yeah.
And we have a president right now that I'm not quite sure of what his.
He got those 3 UCLA players out of China.
And they're really grateful for that.
Yes, they were grateful for a couple days,
And so
then they were less grateful. He's less grateful.
I think USC was less grateful too.
Yeah, that's
Probably
right.
so.
The entire Pac-12. You see it as end of the year conference in January.
Well, I no one knows. I'm just based on some things I've heard and seen recently. I'm more optimistic now than I was, but a fool would predict a date. I can't, have a crystal ball.
Does this say, if they pass it, does this save the Republicans in the midterm?
It helps. I don't.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that have to happen. The economy has to stay strong. The Republicans have to figure out a way to deal with the Roy Moores of the world. There are a lot of things. Yeah, and the Democrats have to come up. The biggest thing that can save Republicans, I'm not sure they can be saved, but the biggest thing that's going for the Republican Party now is the Democrat Party, because no one knows what they stand for. Resistance is not a campaign.
No, it's not. And I think everybody on the Democratic side is starting to realize that they've got to develop some leaders that, Pelosi and Schumer and Joe Biden is not the future to lead a resurrection of the party.
No, and there's, one of the guy that, I think Jim has seen the guy that ran Obama's campaign. He's, very, bright young political operative. And I heard him recently talk about until the Democratic Party has an economic platform, it's very hard to see where it goes. People may not agree with everything in the Republican economic platform, but at least one exists.
So let's jump home state. Today, functionally, news leaked out that the news of last year in December, Virgin Pulse announced that they were going to move 700 jobs here. It now looks like they're going to actually move the headquarters from Framingham, Mass., although that was pretty much anticipated. They're getting around $5.7 million in state subsidies to move into the old Providence Journal building, which has gotten, I think, rebuild money, plus tax stabilization. So we've got a company moving into the state with subsidies into a building that's got subsidies. Is that our economy today?
Well, it's mixed because every state competes, for those kind of headquarters.
Yeah.
And as much as I don't like, tax subsidies and corporate welfare, people use it strategically. So using it strategically for that purpose, if in fact 700 good-paying jobs,
300.
300, if in fact 300 good-paying jobs come here, is a debatable point, and you should not always have a negative position on it. But the bigger picture is this, and this is what I don't understand, and no one's been able to explain it to me. We have a revenue estimating conference. It's bipartisan, and it's by branch. It's 2 from the legislature and the governor's office, and they agree on what the forecast is going to be for jobs and growth and income, and also state budget numbers. When you look at the payroll growth they're projecting, and this is not some partisan banter. These are very good professional people that have done a good job over the years doing their forecasting. They always haven't been exactly right, but they've been more right than wrong significantly. I looked at the payroll, growth of payroll, and between calendar year 2017 and calendar year 8 years out, so that would be 2024. So we're projected to grow like 10 to 15,000 jobs. It's like less than 0.5% a year. And so we're spending all this money on corporate welfare. Commerce Rhode Island spends well over $100 million on various things, and we're sitting back and we have a consensus forecast of almost zero payroll growth.
Right.
Something's wrong, and I can't put my finger on it, but when I see
It'd be cheaper just to hire state employees.
let me tell you, it would be cheap enough to do anything. I'll tell you one funny story. So when Kucheri ran for governor, first time, he pledged to create 20,000 jobs during his first term. And everybody laughed at us. They said, that's really quite a pledge, because we always create 20,000 jobs every 4 years under normal economic conditions.
Right.
And so the first 3 years, he was pretty much on target, and the Great Recession came, and the bottom fell out. I'd like this governor to tell us, in the next term, is that forecast right? How many jobs are we going to create? How much is the taxpayer paying per job to be created? And what are our targets? Are they greenhouses to grow fruit? Are they hotels? Are they office buildings? What are they? What are we targeting? Who are we targeting? What is the job expectancy? What is the cost per job by using these credits? So at least we have, and no one will ever meet the benchmarks. Those are benchmarks. But at least then you'll have some sense of what the strategic direction is of our economic development policy. Right now, we have press releases coming out and saying, which are true, saying that our unemployment's low, we've created jobs, not as fast as Massachusetts, not as fast as the rest of the country.
Well, and 3 months of job loss.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real number. That's not a trend that any governor wants to face, while Massachusetts picked up about 10,000 during that period.
And they'll be adjusted, because the feds come back and readjust those numbers, and they're really at the margins. They're not significant job loss. But that begs the question. The question is this: if we're having an economic recovery and our unemployment rate is 4.2%, how are we not growing jobs?
Right.
And no one can answer those questions. There are a lot of enigmas in what we are trying to do in terms of economic policy. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars on real estate development, and government talks about spending money on education and computer literacy. We have announcements. We point to cranes to build buildings that we're subsidizing to build, and yet when you look at the projection of what our payroll growth is going to be, and a bipartisan projection, not a Republican or not a conservative or a liberal projection, it basically says we would have that rate of growth if we all went to sleep for 4 years and Rip Van Winkle came back. There'd be that rate of growth, probably more. And so that's the enigma. And there are future implications for current decisions. We're making current decisions, and I don't know anybody in the state that could tell you the future implications, at least quantitatively, to 50 degrees, 50% of satisfaction.
Well, I think certainly with I think everybody's disappointed that the amount of investment we've made in bringing companies in, helping them grow, develop real estate, etc., that we'd see better job numbers, especially better paying jobs, than we're seeing right now.
Well, that raises a very basic philosophical question. And how well does government do in picking winners and losers?
Right.
And I don't think any of us can be purists, and none of us have all the answers.
Right.
So we have to use some tax incentives. I could point to some tax incentives I think have been used productively. I look at the
I'll say this about Virgin Pulse before we go. That's probably the best deal been negotiated. It's 300 jobs for $5.7 million. That's probably, and it's a homegrown company. Its original legacy is from here, and it's an interesting partner and ownership group. It is 420. I cannot keep the money man. We cannot afford keeping the money man on overtime.
Before the bank's closed, I gotta get there.
Yeah. Thank you as always. The money man, Gary Sasse, bringing insights both into Washington, where he's been advising Republicans down there, as well as what's going on in the state of Rhode Island. We're going to be right back with a very interesting man who's probably saved more lives than just about anybody in the state of Rhode Island, or right up there. Dr. White from Kenya, one of the most interesting stories you're ever going to hear on GoLocal Live. We'll be right back.